Hello everyone, I am Andrea Petru and today we are here for the EcoFamilies project, which aims to educate people and families especially about environmentally sustainable habits. And together with me is Marcos Nicolaou. Marco, if you can introduce yourself with your interesting background, it will be really nice.
Of course. Hi, thank you for having me. So I'm Marcos, I'm a zoologist, and I've also studied ecology and conservation. And my background is mostly doing field work in different places around the world. I've done field work in Scottish farmlands, in Central America, and most recently in the jungles of the Congo.
Yes, really interesting things. It's not something that you hear every day. It's a unique occupation, I will say. I will start from the jungle because I am really excited about this myself. So you lived in a jungle basically for a year.
Yeah, it was a very intense experience living in a very remote area in the jungle in a tent. But I think it taught me a lot. I've learned about the ecosystem, but also seeing the locals there and having myself lived very simply. I've learned a lot about that you don't need a lot to be happy, to be content. You can just live simply and you get those lessons and you bring them back in the busy city and you realize that there's many ways to live and be happy.
Overconsumption, I guess, is a huge problem. I heard it a lot from
It's something
people.
You don't see there, but you definitely see it here. There are people like the Bayaka people in the Central Africa. They live so simply from the river, from the forest, a little bit of farming, exchanging things between them. It's not as easy to do in the city, but you can definitely take a lot of lessons from that lifestyle.
Yeah, I completely agree. And when we say overconsumption, we may think about things you can take like clothes and toys and this kind of stuff. But for me, and I guess you know more, it's the food as well. And here in the cities, many times we are throwing the food and we don't realize how important it is and the procedure behind it, what we use to actually have this food on our table. So, and you also work in a farm, if I'm not mistaken. So what do you think about this topic, about food and the farming and the agriculture, the procedure of producing our food?
So it's good to think about where our food comes from because we tend to be really disconnected. We just find everything at a supermarket. So having worked around different farmlands in Scotland, we worked in farmlands that had some biodiversity measures and tried to do better, and other ones that were very barren and were doing everything according to industrial workflows. And you can see the difference just by being there. You can see like some farms that tend to think about having pollinators on and using less pesticides and having free-range animals. That translates into not only better quality food, but better carbon footprint and better biodiversity overall for the country. So for us, we have to think where our food comes from and look for maybe more sustainable choices when we're shopping.
And a more difficult question, I will say, a challenging one. So as a parent, how can I educate my children about this? I mean, he may not realize where the food comes from.
Yeah.
Or the whole things that you just mentioned about the pesticides and all of these things. So how should I educate my children to be more responsible?
So I think that's a really important question, actually, and it's good to start teaching kids about nature, about ecosystems in general, about how we humans are just part of the earth and we're part of a cycle, and how we're sharing this planet with wildlife and how important nature is to us and our living. We're not just disconnected living in our cities. So you start small, obviously, with books or with films, but also just going out in the garden, going out on trips in the countryside, and even in your own garden, you can make it more wildlife friendly. You can plant pollinator flowers, you can put out bird feeders, and you can teach them about local wildlife, and then how that will translate into better practices from everyone if we respected that wildlife.
That's a really good point, because I believe education is a huge thing, generally not about green sector only specifically, but in general. And I think you just mentioned that educate them from young age to realize that nature is not something outside. Actually, we live in nature. We are part of the nature, and we have to respect it. Yes, I completely agree with you. So, as a ecologist, or as well, what do you think of any specific activity, maybe outside in the garden, that we can do to educate the children?
So one thing will be to grow your own plants if you have the space. Even though you don't need a lot of space, especially for specific vegetables, you can just have them in a small pot. And then for the kids, it can be exciting to watch something grow and then harvesting it and eating it. Some things are very easy, like bell peppers. Also, just planting pollinating flowers out in the yard. We choose local species, and then just seeing butterflies or bees coming to the yard. And then you can explain to them, like depending on the age, how everything is interconnected, how a bee goes from flower to flower, and then that sustains a flower cycle and also sustains the bee colony. And that's how we also live. We're sustained by nature.
Yeah, that's true. So thank you very much for all of this useful information. And now I would like to go to a more practical topic, let's say. Do you have any specific recommendations that a family can do to actually adopt more sustainable habits, like I don't know, reduce single-use plastics? It's a thing, or recycling, it's another thing. Do you have any examples that you may want to share with us?
Yeah, so you mentioned it's important to reduce plastic. So when we're buying things, we should avoid excessive packaging. But also we should buy local things. We have really nice farmer markets here in Cyprus. So you should look where the nearest farmer's market is near you and when it is, because they're not every day. And also, other than buying local, a lot of things we don't produce here in Cyprus, but it's good to look at the labels. Especially if you have the money, you should look for organic and ecological labels, because that tells you that the products have been grown sustainably with respect to wildlife, without using excessive pesticides, without huge carbon footprints, especially for things that come from tropical areas like coffee, cocoa, palm oil, stuff like that.
That's good points, actually. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Marco. So just to round up and close it, any additional thing that you would like to say to families who are trying, actually, not only to the children, but also the parents, because it's both sides that they need to be educated, that you would like to share with them as an expertise to the field?
Yeah, I mean, other than what we already said, I think it's important to remember that it takes small changes to add up as a big change. So if you're a parent and you're worried, oh, I'm not doing this, we're consuming too much this, but just slowly look into what you can do. And then we don't need like 1 million people doing it perfectly and going vegan and using zero plastic and having a perfect comfort food. We actually need billions of people doing it imperfectly and having these small changes and being more educated on these matters and just trying a little bit here, a little bit there. And that's what you should instill in your child as well, that you should try a little bit, as much as you can, to do all these things that we mentioned.
I like that a lot. I mean, it was brilliant. Small changes for a big impact, exactly.
Exactly.
That's a really nice and valid, strong point for the ending. So thank you very much. Thank you, Marco.
Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.